We now have our engine out here on the engine stand, and we're going to start to disassemble it. So probably the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and pull this fan off. I'm going to try and take most of this motor apart using just hand tools. And it's for two reasons. One, to show you that you can do it with just hand tools. Second reason, you get a better feel with hand tools. Because you can break stuff with an impact in a hurry. So you got these two acorn nuts up here. And they're 9/16. So it's like this one's wanting to pull the stud out. This is just a little breather here. That just slides off. Little filter element. You can get these new, so I wouldn't even bother cleaning it. I would just trash it. Alright, this is the first time I'm getting to see inside this engine, so hopefully it's not disappointing. I mean, the motor ran, so nothing should be broken, but I have no idea how sludged up or nasty or anything like that it's going to be. So let's see. It's actually very nice. Pretty clean in valve cover. Okay, everything up here looks pretty good. I don't see anything obvious we messed up. It kind of freaks me out or anything of that nature. So I don't have my light with me, but on these diesels, make sure these solder joints are good, because they can crack. And even though this is low pressure, it will still leak diesel fuel into your crankcase. So I know that mine was really full of oil, and hopefully it was just oil. And I don't have any issues. But I don't really see anything unusual. Once I get it off, I'll inspect it a little more. But what I'm going to do now, there's a bolt right here that holds this oil pipe, and a bolt that holds this oil pipe. This pipe here is basically an overflow. It just comes out of the rocker shaft and drops it right back down to the head. This pipe is actually your feed pipe. And there is a seal down there. It's like way down in here. This one's pretty loose, so it kind of worries me a little bit. But I'll get these two guys off. Of course, these pipes share the mount, with the rocker arms. So as you loosen this, your valve springs are going to push them up. If you want, you can go ahead and loosen all of your lash adjuster caps, if you want to call them that, or lash adjustment, and it'll help relieve some of that pressure. Okay, there we're on the valve train a little bit better. So we have our bolt, lock washer, and these little metal tabs that hold our pipe on. We'll just kind of wiggle and twist this pipe up out of here, like so. So there's no air angle on this one, because this is just an overflow one. Okay, same thing. Just kind of wiggle it while pulling upwards. Okay, now down here we have a seal. This is kind of a square cut O-ring. You can get this seal, so that's not an issue. Just be sure you put this back when you rebuild the engine with a new one, or else you'll have bad oil pressure. Go ahead and get these guys loose, because I may take them out of each rocker. That way I can get down in them cleaned up really well. Okay, so there's all those loose. Now, I left them all in here because one thing about valve train components, they all wear each other in a certain manner. So if you mix these up, you'll have different wear patterns meshing. Which, on tractor engines, probably not that big of a deal. But on a car engine, you can get some noises and possibly even some harmonics. So just try to keep everything, like this one here, this is the exhaust valve for number 1. Try to keep the rocker, the adjuster, the push rod, and the lifter all for number 1 exhaust. Okay, let's go ahead and get these other rocker arm bolts off. That one's a different size and it's longer. Okay, so I got these bolts out. Now this rear bolt is gigantic. I'm almost thinking this is actually a head bolt that goes all the way through the head into the block. So it's pretty easy to not get it mixed up. Lift off this rocker arm assembly. Just like so. So now, here's all of the push rods. I need to get my tray and stick them in there. If you don't have a tray, you just label them with a piece of tape and a Sharpie marker, or stick them down into some cardboard. Just whatever you can do to keep them in order. And this is the tray. So I can't get it all on camera, but it has places for rocker arms, push rod, valve spring. Here's some bolts, whatnot. So this one actually has an F and an R marked on it for front and rear. So that'll help a little bit. And this one's a V8 configuration, so it gives me plenty of room for this little 4-cylinder. Okay, so now that I got that off, my next step is to take my diesel injector leak-off line off. There's a little screw right here, or nut if you want to call it that. So screw that guy loose. And then we'll take each of these off and then gently lift that up. Let's see if I can get a flare wrench on this guy. It's actually pretty loose, so that's a good thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and loosen these guys and get them off. Because I want to say that when I did this on my 861, when I started to loosen this screw, this nut, it actually started to lift. This T-fitting actually started to pull up, which then you put strain on all the joints, more susceptible to breaking them. Now each of these injectors are kind of like a banjo type fitting. They have these little copper washers on them. So if you're not fully disassembling the engine, be sure you get those little washers there out. And do not drop them down into the engine. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to just take them loose, set them on up here on the valve spring. Once I get this tube off, I'm going to stick the bolt back in there. And I just knocked one of them off. It's a little cold down here in my basement working on this thing, so I'm having to wear my coat. It kind of gets in the way of doing some stuff. But it is a little warmer in here than it is down in the chicken house. Okay, so there's that nut loose right there. See, that's loose. There is a seal down there. So you just wiggle it and it pops out. And the seal stayed in there, which also means this nut now will slide off. So don't lose your tubing nut. And like I said, I'll stick the bolts back down into the injectors. I don't know where the extra washers went here and here, because there's a washer on either side of that tubing. That way it seals on both sides. Now my next step to get, or next part, step, whatever you want to call it, is to pull these injectors out. Now they came out pretty easy on my 861, which I think they may have been changed before, I don't know. So these I have no clue, so these might fight me. So let's get these injectors off and see how much they're going to fight me. One thing I have not mentioned on these injectors, which I haven't said a lot about them just yet anyway, these little seals right here, they have started reproducing these. However, these look different on this head than they did on my 861 head. They look smaller, so I'm not 100% sure which ones they reproduce. So be very careful with these guys. They're a rubber, so this is actually a pretty pliable rubber, The one on the 861 was very hard. When I put these back, I'm going to clean them up really well, and I'm just going to stick some RTV around them just to help seal it in. Because if not, you know, it'll leak some oil out and get all over a nice new shiny engine. And hopefully I can get it to pry, or get these injectors to pop up from here all the way. Because there is actually another fitting right here that you can unscrew and get out. But that's one more leak point. So I'm going to try to avoid that. Now they make a tool that goes in here and grabs them and pulls them. I don't have it. So I just stuck a screwdriver down in there. Right there behind it. And just popped it up. And as you see, the little seal came with it. Like I say, here's the next one. Undo the mounting bolt on both sides. Stick your screwdriver underneath it. And just pop it up. Now one thing I'm not seeing on these. On my 861, there was a cork seal here. There's a groove here. This is the nozzle piece here, and there's a groove here. I don't think there's supposed to be an O-ring there. It's probably just supposed to be that piece of cork there, which will seal oil from your head getting down into your injectors and your combustion chamber. And as old as these are, they probably are having an issue with sticking, you know, from stiction or something, due to oil getting in there and burning them. Or burning and creating a varnish in there. So that is probably why this thing wouldn't rev right. So there's a chance the nozzle itself is fine, but it's just gummy and nasty. Yeah, these things are like coated in oil. There's our last one. We're done in our valve train, at least as far as we're going to do it here. So what I'm going to do now is, on this side of the head, there's 3 studs for my manifolds. Up here at the front of the head, we have our thermostat housing. This side we have our injector leak off fitting, and we have our 2 bolts that mounted our diesel fuel filter. I'm going to go ahead and get all of this stuff off of here and set aside. On this head, or these manifold sides, there's studs and bolts. And I can't remember if it's all supposed to be studs or all supposed to be bolts, or a mix and match. And I don't think the parts catalog shows that. So what I would suggest you do, which is what I'm getting ready to do myself, is I'm going to pull out my phone and take a picture of where these studs are. So that way, if these 3 studs are correct, I want to put them back in the same location. So that's the good thing about these little cell phones. Everybody's got a camera, which I guess sometimes that could be bad. You just take a picture of it for your record. Which another thing is, you know, obviously you're going to have my video on how to do this, but take your camera out, take pictures. You know, The more pictures you have, the more chance you got for reference if you get lost or screw something up. So let's go ahead and pull these guys off and we'll set them aside. These will be cleaned up, and I'll probably take these and just plate these. And the reason I choose between plating or painting, you know, even though that bracket is blue, was that bracket on there when they painted the tractor blue at the factory, or was it added later? I don't know. So I'm probably just going to plate those since my bracket is separate. Yeah, it's just one of those little things that you kind of wonder. So let me get this guy. To get these studs out, you can do it one of two ways. And it kind of depends on how easy they want to cooperate. There's a flat spot on them where you can probably put a pair of vice grips on and get them. Or you can double nut it. More than likely I'm going to double nut these. Let's work around to the front here a second. Okay, and here's our thermostat housing. I'm going to go ahead and get it off. We have 2 bolts here to get. Alright, hopefully there ain't a bunch of coolant sitting in here. And there's not. And this is apparently the original thermostat. Which, if this is an original thermostat, it says March 1964, so maybe that tells me this tractor is a 1964 model tractor. Okay, so we got this stud right here. I got 2 nuts. Yeah, I know, funny, right? These are 7/16 20s. And something I have noticed on these old tractors, anytime that a bolt went into a casting, such as, you know, the cast iron, they would use a coarse thread. But outside of there, like on these studs, they were all fine thread. So keep that in mind. So take both nuts, you thread them on. You need 2 inches for this. Your outer nut, you're going to tighten. Your inner nut, you're going to loosen. So that way they lock together. Now you take your inner nut and you spin it out. It pulls the stud. And as you can see, this is a coarse thread because it's in the casting. And just do that with all 3 of the studs that I have here. Okay, so now we're ready to unbolt the head and pull the head off. Now, the way that I unbolt cylinder heads, if you ever have changed a head, you know, they have you start basically from your center out, torquing them back down. So whenever I take them off, I detorque them from the outside in. Some of you will say, you know, you do it the same way as you torque them on, but I do it the opposite. Okay, let's see if this thing will cooperate with it sticking straight up. Well, sometimes it's easier if you turn it sideways and have gravity help you. But this thing's probably still full of coolant, or some in it, so I prefer not to dump that all over my floor if possible. Okay, down in this valley area we have 2, 4, 6, 8 short bolts. All these bolts out here probably the same. This guy here might be the same as these, but he's kind of a loner up on a little pedestal here. So keep that in mind when you go to put it back, that you got different length bolts. Probably should have mentioned these are 3/4 inch bolts. But like I say, everything on this tractor is standard. If you run across something that's not standard, it's not original. Okay. pull all these bolts out of here. Let's see here. Okay, that bolt is the same, so that's good. Okay, now on these heads, and I'm pretty sure this applies for the gas engine as well. There are no dowel pins. This head, if I wanted to, I could take it right now and just push it off to the side. Obviously, I don't want to do that because it's going to fall and break. So when you go to break the seal loose on your head gasket, be aware of that. And boy, mine is stuck good. There we go. And one thing to remember, this head is very heavy. So, before you go pull this off, be sure you ate your Wheaties. Okay, so there it's loose. And our gasket is now off. Or not our gasket. Our cylinder head is now off. A little bit of delayed reaction there, huh?